Hatchet, a game about customer service and hiding a body with a true crime fan. I was the co-director for this game over at Seta City for the Spooktober 2023 Game Jam, and I did the majority of the programming, writing, and gameplay design. We decided to use RPG Maker, a notably 2D game engine, for this game jam to make a 3D, 2.5D game, so let's see how I manage that. The structure of the game itself is pretty simple, and it follows a typical 3-act beat. Each act has a minigame section which transitions into a choice section loop. And then I have 3 of those. I add a tutorial and finale sequence on either end of the game, and that's the game! The minigame section works as follows. Customers want an item, and they want you to get it for them ASAP. A timer plays, and if you do not get the item in time, they will call the manager, and it will result in a game over. I thought that having the main mechanic of the game being about finding items while the story has you hiding a body would be a fun little subversion of things. I like having gameplay mechanics reflect the storytelling of the game. The initial plan was to have a pool of customer interactions that would be randomized, but we simply did not end up doing that for simplicity's sake, and they have a hard-coded order. For the timer, I tried out several different iterations of it, initially using RPG Maker's base timer, and thinking that was okay, but it was not, because I couldn't reset it after every customer interaction, so I switched over to some random dude, the person, not a random dude, his version of a timer plugin, like 3 weeks into the game jam. In addition, we had our assistant writer Sheep, who wrote the customer interaction dialogues, and they were very funny and good. Thank you, Sheep! The game has 3 separate main endings, which are determined by 2 things: being nice to Pearl during the choice sections of the game, and whether or not you want to give your keys to Brandon at the end of the game. I tried to make the choices a little less obvious as to which one is the right one to get the best ending, but I think I made them a little bit too hard because most people had to backtrack in order to change their options, but oh well! The one notable outlier from the gameplay is the chase sequence, which we intended as a fun subversion of the typical RPG Maker horror chase scene, and it was, I want to say fine, but it was not very good in comparison to how polished the rest of the game was. I don't think it detracted from the game, because having a scene where you start chasing someone is a fun segue into the climax of the game, but there's nothing else in the game really like it, so it really only feels like a fun subversion if you've played 5 billion RPG Maker games beforehand and have done a typical chase sequence before. Beary the Hatchet was a game that was primarily dialogue only and had a black comedy tone. I am a writer that specializes in lavish purple prose and more serious writing, so this was a challenge. As mentioned before, I took a 3-stage approach. Tutorial, 3 loops of ramping up action and stakes, and then an ending sequence. I wanted to keep things tightly knit and fit well within the confined setting of the gas station, because I think stories that take place in only one area are cool and fun. Horror movie flick character tropes were emphasized. We had the faceless serial killer, overconfident jock, ditzy first victim, and final girl. Pearl, the final girl, was actually the character that went through the most iterations both writing and design-wise before we settled on who exactly she'd be. We discussed salarywoman, housewife, elementary schooler, etc. before deciding on a college student as the true crime archetype. We probably made the right choice because Angela's design of her won Best of Spooktober. Yippee! The tone we went for this game was Saturday morning cartoon. The game's story is not necessarily shallow, but it definitely is more on the lighthearted end. You can really see the cartoony influence inspired by shows like Danny Phantom and Angela's environmental concept art. Kane, our pixel artist, did a wonderful job translating it into pixel art in-game. It genuinely looks so close to the concept art, I kind of lost my mind while implementing it. All in all, I wanted the story to complement Angela's amazing art direction, and I think I did a good job. With regards to technical implementation, we used the 3D MV plugin by QtVirus on itch, and it was really great. But also, was making a 3D game in a 2D engine a struggle? Aw man! A lot of time was spent on the store layout with the guidance of our architecture specialist Ryan, and making sure the player could see things. We initially considered having the player be able to move the camera around, but it made for some janky movement and whatnot. I also couldn't have the camera angle too high up, or it would cause for clipping, so I had to tweak the store layout to make sure shelves were visible and clear with regards to what each one held. I took a semi-lazy approach on this one by just having massive signs on each shelf, but hey, that's how it is in real life too, so it's fine. biggest problem was due to how the 3D MV plugin worked. In order to have objects show up on the map, we needed to create RPG Maker events that said what should pop up where, and these were not easily copy-pastable like with a default tile set. This meant for efficiency's sake, we needed most of the game to take place on the same map, unlike most RPG Maker games which use multiple identical maps to more neatly organize cutscenes and whatnot. This was not hard, it was just a pain, very tedious. Kane helped a lot with this. Thank you, Kane! Finally, RPG Maker is an engine for RPGs, not point-and-click adventure games, so I had to use the TDDP_mouse system-EX plugin to accomplish this effect. In order to implement sections where the player picks up items for customers, I had to create separate map layouts for every single shelf, work out the exact hitboxes for each item the player needed to pick up, and then painstakingly test it out because there's no real way to neatly do custom hitboxes in RPG Maker. But it worked! There were problems that came up, of course, because when do they ever not in games? A week and a half before the Spooktober deadline, I got COVID. And since up until that point, I was the sole writer and programmer as well as a co-producer, co-director, whatever. That was really rough. I was completely conked out for 3 days and couldn't even look at my screen without a headache before I managed to pull my laptop into bed with me and get at least some work done. Big problem too was the night before the game was due, the base file was corrupted and we lost all progress, seemingly. That was a big freakout before you realize that RPG Maker is pretty easy to reverse engineer if you haven't encrypted the files, and we had just made a playtest build an hour beforehand, so that was great. Overall, despite some pretty big bumps, things went pretty smoothly. I had a wonderful team working on the project, and Rom did an absolutely banger job with the OST. Just give it a listen! Please check out my Itch and Set a City's other works if you liked the game. We work really hard on our projects and I really adore getting to work with this team of people. In addition, consider subscribing to me or checking out my Twitch. I am working on implementing more game dev stuff. So yeah, okay, bye, see ya, bye bye!